1955 to September 1959. I was in the Coast Guard.
Okay. So that was between Korea and Vietnam.
That's correct.
Okay. And you were in the Coast Guard. What was your highest rank in the Coast Guard?
Second class yeoman.
Okay.
Yeoman second.
Okay. And then while you were in the Coast Guard, in what general locations did you serve?
After boot camp in Cape May, I was at captain of the port in Boston for a number of months, and then I was transferred. Oh, I guess I started in Nahant Lifeboat Station in Nahant, Massachusetts.
Okay.
They had a lifeboat station with a duck that goes into the water from the beach,
Okay.
and so
Duck
forth.
boat.
And I was there for a number of months, and then eventually transferred to captain of the port in Boston. And then after a year or more there, I went to Coast Guard cutter Eastwind, which was a icebreaker. And the summer of 1955, the summer of 1958, we went to Greenland and we broke ice in Sandestrom Air Base, Sandestrom Fjord, and at the end of that fjord, 90 miles inland, we were breaking ice with a tanker behind us to refuel the air base. 5 feet thick ice that we were cutting through so that the tanker could get through. For Sandestrom Air Base, which was an American air base at that time. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we went over to East Greenland, and they were setting up some dew line stations at that point over in East Greenland. But that was my 55 tour with the Eastwind.
Coast Guard cutter Eastwind.
Coast Guard cutter Eastwind, okay. Right.
Were you an officer or were you enlisted?
No, I was enlisted.
You were? Okay.
I was a yeoman in the...
Okay. So you said you did go to basic training?
Oh, yes.
To the Coast Guard?
Cape May, New Jersey, yes.
Well, can you tell me why did you join the Coast Guard? What was going through your mind? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. The Korea was hot at that time, and the Army was catching up with me, and if I hung around, I would have been enlisted into the Army, and so I decided 4 years in the Coast Guard was better than 2 years in the Army, so that's what I did.
Perfect. And how was you remember how your family took that? Were they proud of you? Were they nervous
were
about
totally supportive of any decision that I made.
Beautiful. Okay. So you did your time in the Coast Guard, and then after that you went on to do something else that was very much involved with the military as well.
Well, after the Coast Guard, I finished my college. I spent 3 years to finish my degree at Boston University, and after BU, I interviewed for the Red Cross, and then went with Red Cross in September of 1962, right?
62. Okay.
So,
yep, September 62.
Right.
Do you remember were you just looking for work, or did you actually have a motive behind why you went with the Red Cross?
Well, I was interested in social work, but I was tired of going to school and didn't want to go to social work school. And so the placement office lined me up for interviews with either the YMCA or the Red Cross, and I interviewed with both and chose the Red Cross.
And what did you do initially? What were your first
My first 7 years with the Red Cross was with the service to the armed forces, where we we are the link between the SAF is the link between the serviceman away from home and the family back home for emergency situations. And so during my first few years with Red Cross, I was at Fort Belvoir, Fort Meade in Maryland, um, Fort Knox in Kentucky, and then from there I was assigned to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, where the 25th Infantry Division was. And I was at the Red Cross offices at all of those locations. And then it was in, I went to Hawaii in, let me think, 19, let me see, 64. And then in 1966, the 25th Infantry was assigned to go to Vietnam. And so I was assigned as their Red Cross representative to go with them. So I put on the appropriate uniform for Vietnam and was in the MAC-V plane with them and landed in Saigon with them.
Oh, wow.
And then we went up the road to Cu Chi, which is about 20 miles northwest of Saigon, and began to build our base camp. And that became the base camp on the cassava fields of Cu Chi. The thing that we didn't know about that location was about the Viet Cong tunnels that were underneath the base camp at Cu Chi. So after we had been there for a while, the Viet Cong would pop out of the tunnels at night and send mortars into our base camp. And so we had to build shelters that we could jump into to be protected from the mortars.
And this is where the division headquarters was?
Yes, this is the division headquarters for the whole Vietnam War for the 25th Infantry, yes.
And you said you donned a uniform. Was you, as a Red Cross representative, what was your uniform?
It was the same uniform as the military wore, the fatigues with a Red Cross patch, and it said Chapman Red Cross. I had that same helmet that they wore with the Red Cross patch up with Red Cross button on the front.
So what were you thinking? You went to work for the Red Cross, and you're in Hawaii. You probably what did you think of your time while you're in Hawaii? Were you excited to go to Hawaii?
Excited to go to Hawaii, yes.
Yes.
I mean, I was there for 2 years before I went to Vietnam, and so Hawaii is a wonderful place to be. Being a New Englander, I missed the seasons of New England because in Hawaii, every day is beautiful. They don't seem to have seasons. You know, they have some rain sometime, but the whole year, there are blossoms, and it's a very different climate than you have in New England. So, I missed the 4 seasons, but it's a good place to be.
Not a terrible place to be at, right?
No, no complaints. And I got to see all of Hawaii while I was there, of course. Invited the family over because I had a 2-bedroom house, and so was able to have my parents come over and some other family members, and I would take vacation time when they arrived, and we'd do visit the other islands. And
As a Red Cross representative, were you allowed to live in military housing where
no,
you lived off base?
No, the general did not want the Red Cross people to be in the BOQ. When I had been at the other installations in the eastern part of the United States, I was able to live in the bachelor officers' quarters. But in Vietnam, he wanted the BOQ for his unmarried soldiers, and so I rented a house in Wahiawa, which is the local town.
Mhm.
So I had a 2-bedroom house, and that's how I was able to invite my parents and others to come visit Hawaii.
Nice. Nice. So you're in Hawaii, and the 25th, as you said, 25th Infantry Division gets orders to go to Vietnam.
Right.
Um, did your employer say you're going, or was it a volunteer basis? Who wants to go, or do you want to go? How were you confronted with the idea?
It was an assignment. I was told I was going. I was the person chosen to go with the 25th Infantry, and so I go where I'm assigned, and so I went.
So is this something that you had expected could happen? Did you know that this was something that could happen? You would end up going to?
No, I didn't anticipate anything like this happening, and was not terribly happy about it at the time. Going to Vietnam for a war scene, and so I was not thrilled to be going, but I certainly adjusted to it.
And how did I'm sure you communicated this back to your family, that you were on order, you were going to Vietnam.
Yes.
And how did you remember that conversation?
Well, I think most of our conversations were by letter or by recorded tape.
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing. That's the way we communicated back and forth. So I let them know that I was going, and they accepted anything that was going to happen to me.
Okay, they supported you. That's good.
Oh yes.
Good. Okay, so while you're in Vietnam working for the Red Cross,
right?
Well, first, before we go into like any personal stories, you remember things happening, because you're on in a combat zone. That's where you were at, in a combat zone, as a non-soldier, I guess is what you'd say.
Correct.
Why? Can you tell us what benefit or what purpose is there to have someone such as yourself working the Red Cross in country, so to speak, in the country where the war is being fought?
Well, the Red Cross has a mission of serving the military around the world, wherever they are, and so I was there to help fulfill the Red Cross mission. So that was my purpose in being there, and I mean there were 5 of us in the Red Cross office, which we set up in a tent. All of the military set up tents at Cu Chi, so our office was in a tent and so forth.
And those are your living quarters, tents.
Living quarters was a different tent. Yes.
And was your sole purpose mainly 25th Infantry Division and taking care of them as far as messaging, emergencies come and so on, notifying them, or did you actually other divisions there were? I mean, there were, I don't know how many, but there were multiple divisions in Vietnam.
Well, I was with the 25th Infantry for the first 4 months that I was there, and then I was assigned to a different location for a month. I was assigned to Tay Ninh when the 196th Life Infantry Brigade came in from Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I was there for 1 month as the Red Cross representative for them. And then after that, I came back to Cu Chi for a time, and then they assigned me over to Phan Rang for another TDY for the 101st
101st Division?
Yeah, 101st Division.
Airborne Division.
Yeah, so I was over there for a month. And then after that, they assigned me to Saigon, to a Red Cross office.
You're all over.
Yeah, so I did move around a little bit.
Do you remember by any chance how to spell Phan Rang?
Phanrang, 2 words.
Okay. So you were there for, was your tour, was it a year, or how long was your tour?
I was there for a year. Yes.
For a year. Okay. And you told us about some mortar attacks and so on with the 25th Infantry
Right.
on Cu Chi.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have any other experiences in any of the other places, Saigon or Phan Rang?
Well, I was pretty much carrying out the mission of the Red Cross
Mm-hmm.
the whole time. You know, I was able to get into Saigon out of Cu Chi on weekends, you know, to enjoy the city.
Okay.
I did that.
But you were pretty much for the safe. You were in Vietnam, but you're more or less in safer areas. You didn't really come under many other attacks
No.
outside of Cu Chi.
No, that's right. I was there was not any war activity going on other than the mortars coming in. I was, you know, this was long before the Tet Offensive, which happened in 1968.
Right.
And so there was very little war activity in the city area. And so there was no big danger from that.
Okay. Okay. Um, what were your first impressions upon arriving in Vietnam? Do you remember what was going through your mind? You landed there in Cu Chi. Did you land in Cu Chi? Or?
No, I landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon. That's where we landed.
You're getting off the plane. Do you remember what's going through your mind?
Well, I got off the plane and I decided that I needed to go find the Red Cross office and let them know that I had arrived.
So they didn't have a greeting party there? Someone there to greet you to let you know?
No, they had no idea that I was coming. I don't think. I mean, that office didn't know I was coming, but the headquarters folks knew that I was coming because I was with the military, you know, when I arrived.
You were a little different. You know, the soldiers generally have someone that tells them where to go. You go here.
No.
You go.
Nobody was telling me where to go.
No.
We were there for 2 or 3 hours before we got into vehicles and went up the road 20 miles to Cu Chi. So I had 2 or 3 hours to just walk around and find the Red Cross office and greet the people there and let them know I'd arrived and so forth. That's what I did.
Okay. So can you just describe a typical day for you while you're in Vietnam? What was a typical day?
Well, you know, we're at a desk or a table, and we receive wires that come in over the military system from Red Cross chapter, from AmCross. You know, the chapters, the 3,000 Red Cross chapters across the country at that time.
Across the United States or
across the United States. And when there's an emergency situation where they need to get in touch with the field director overseas, the Red Cross has a section called AmCross, which sends wires all over the world to wherever the Red Cross offices are located. And so we would receive those wires of information, and then when let's say it's a birth announcement, we would call the first sergeant after we get this wire that came from AmCross and ask for, usually we try to get the serviceman involved into our office so that we can let them know in person what's going on, whether it's an emergency in the family. And so we would call the first sergeant or whoever we needed to call to get the guy into the office, sit him down, and then tell him whatever information. If it's a birth announcement, we would let him know that. If it's an emergency for the involving the family, then you know, let's say that an immediate family member was very sick. Then we would ask them if they wanted to go home. You know, if was that their father had a heart attack or something like that and may not survive or whatever. And he says, yes, I want to go home. And then we say that when he's in the office. We don't do any of these things over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So it may take a while to get the guy in from the field or wherever he is. And then if he says he wants to go home, we call the personnel office and arrange for a 30-day emergency leave. And then we then call the first sergeant or his commanding officer to let him know the situation. And then emergency leave is granted, and he gets ready and is on his way home.
Okay.
For 30 days.
And you provide services also, financial services, and to help
Yes,
them.
They would have a military flight from Vietnam to Travis Air Force Base, California. And then at Travis Air Force Base, let's say they live in Chicago, they could get a loan from the loan or grant, depending upon their financial situation, from the Red Cross at the Red Cross office in Travis, and then take a commercial plane to their home. And that's the way it works. And they're on their own for those 30 days.
Perfect. Okay. Did you, within the Red Cross office, the Red Cross community, I should say, did you experience any losses due to any combat activity or any enemy activity? I guess I should say, because obviously you guys would not be in combat. But
I was not aware of any losses while I was in Vietnam, but after I came home, I learned that one of our service to the armed forces men was killed in combat during the 9 years of the Red Cross War. I think one man died, and then 4 of the women who were over there also died because they were in a more dangerous area. The women, that part of Red Cross is called SRIO, Supplemental Recreational Activities Overseas. And these are women who had just graduated from college in their early 20s or earlier, and were recruited by Red Cross to serve in Vietnam for 1 year and provide recreational activities for the military to get their mind off the war.
mm-hmm.
And they had done this in World War II, where the women went to Europe and also to the Far East to serve, to make coffee and donuts for the GIs. And so, but in Korea and Vietnam, where the Red Cross women served, there was no coffee and donuts. It was recreational activities, but the GIs always called them donut dollies. Mm-hmm. And that was the nickname that stuck. And so over the course of the Vietnam War, there were perhaps as many as 900 young women who served for 1 year in Vietnam. And the GIs are still grateful to them for having given up a year of their life to go to a combat zone. And 4 of them did die while they were there. We have a memorial at national headquarters for them and for the other man who died.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nice. They definitely served a well-needed purpose.
Correct.
Definitely. So while you were over there, how did you stay in touch with your family and friends back in the States?
Well, I didn't have a tape recorder like I had in Hawaii, so it was letters. Mm-hmm. Letters back and forth. I probably at least every week I was sending letters back and forth to my family.
And they were back and forth. They were in contact
Yes.
with you quite a bit.
Yes.
Did you eat in the Army dining facility?
Yes,
The same thing the soldiers ate, pretty much.
yes, that's right, in the mess hall.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel lacking of any supplies or any materials that might have made your mission or your task easier for you, or did you pretty much have what you needed? Or?
I pretty much had what I needed. You know, I had my own supply of items, and of course, there's the PX in Saigon where I could get things. So there was no lack of those kind of things. They provided well for that.
No, the soldiers didn't. The meal was a part of their. Did you have to pay to eat in the mess halls, or was that provided for you?
No, that the Red Cross has provided all of those benefits as a part of their service. There was no need to pay.
Your housing, your tent.
No,
It was all there.
no money exchange for our being there.
So, Philip, as a Red Cross representative, how did you feel? Did you feel much stress while you were in country? Obviously, you weren't in combat, but you're still in proximity.
No, I was not nervous or stressful. I enjoyed my assignment. And the military were very grateful for being there. I remember on occasions that I would get a helicopter ride, or one time I went with in a smaller plane where one of the pilots was looking for places to call in the jets to bomb. And after lunch one day, I was eating with a pilot in the mess hall, and he said, "You want to go up with me?" And I said, "Sure." And so it was a small plane. He was looking for places to call in the jets. So I did that one time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Did you have anything to do with coordinating or the USO shows at all, or did you have anything to do with that at all?
No, I was not involved in any of that. No, I don't think the Red Cross was involved in coordinating any of those things. That's totally separate.
Okay. Did you go to any shows while you were there?
No, I didn't see any shows. You see, 1966, 67 was early in the game, so I don't believe there were any shows during that time. They probably didn't come in until later. I don't remember it. Oh, I guess, yeah, I heard that Martha Ray was there while I was there. So maybe there was something go on, but there was nothing that happened at Kuchi when I was there.
Okay, we do have some pictures of her there. I don't remember the years though.
Okay.
So you did your service there for a year in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You remember when you finally got to leave country and head back to the States? What was going through your mind? What was that? How did that feel for you?
Well, I came home in February of 1950. What was it? No, 1967.
67, right?
67, yeah, and was happy to be coming home, and then after that I was assigned to another military. I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, was my assignment after Vietnam.
Okay.
Yes.
And you were doing pretty much the same thing there at Fort Devens.
Yes, correct.
You might have been on the sending end.
That's right.
To Vietnam rather than.
Well, no, because I was not in the community. I was still on a military base, and so I was doing the same thing with soldiers who were assigned to Fort Devens.
Okay, I see.
See, the same thing, the link between the family back home and the military away from home. Just not as far away from home as Vietnam.
Now, did you? I kind of want to back up real quick. Did you meet anyone special while you were in Vietnam?
Yes, I met the woman that I married.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, when I went to the Red Cross office at Saigon, at Tan Son Nhut, when I first arrived, the receptionist's name was Miss Mai. and we had a nice conversation, and we stayed in touch after while I was in Kuchi, and she invited me down to meet her family on weekends. Her father was a French professor at the military academies in Vietnam. Her brother was a two-star general in the South Vietnamese Army, and she had another brother in the military also. Another brother who was a professor of French professor. Her father was a French professor also. Um, and before I left Vietnam, we had a big family wedding. And so when I came home, Miss Mai uh, came with me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. She was able to fly back with you?
Yes. Yes, the Red Cross was able to arrange for her to be on the same plane with me, which was a pretty special because that doesn't usually happen.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the bride comes later.
Right.
But the Red Cross realized that if they had to deal with trying to get a plane for her alone, it would be a big problem, and it would be a lot easier if she could go. And so the military finally agreed, and so we came together.
Nice. So she was a local national that worked for the Red Cross?
Yes,
or?
she was a local national who worked for the Red Cross. She'd been working for the Red Cross for 4 years.
And just...
And the reason that we got acquainted was that I was amazed that her English was perfect with no accent.
Really?
And I couldn't believe it, that she knew English so well. But she had studied English in school and also French. And so that was part of what attracted me to her ability to speak such perfect English.
All right. It's a very intelligent young lady.
Yeah.
No doubt. And she continued to work with the Red Cross, or?
She continued to work with the Red Cross until 2 months before I left, and that was at the time that we got married. And because at that time, after we were married and we knew we were coming to the United States, she had to get all sorts of documentation
Mm-hmm.
to leave the country and so forth. So she left her job and started working with various offices to get what she needed, which was not an easy task.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But we made it.
Okay, Phil. So you came back with your bride.
Yep.
To the United States, and you continued working with the Red Cross in various military locations.
Right.
How long did you stay with the Red Cross?
Well, I was with them a total of 33 years. After Fort Devens, we were there until, let me think, 1969, I think, something like that. And then I went into a different section of the Red Cross, was called Service to Chapters. And then I was assigned to Albany, New York, to work with Red Cross chapters throughout Eastern and Central New York. And that was I had left Service to the Armed Forces section of Red Cross and went to a section called Service to Chapters, and so that was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And stayed with that section the rest of my career.
Well, did you make any, besides your wife, did you make any long-term connections based on your experiences in Vietnam with other Red Cross workers or with soldiers that you've maintained, that you've been in contact with anyone?
I didn't really have any connection or relationship with soldiers. Okay. I knew the general, General Wyant, of course, who had been in Hawaii. I had worked with him at Schofield Barracks and with his wife with the water safety program there in Schofield Barracks. and so we knew each other in Cu Chi also. Um, but I had no special relationship with anybody like that.
Do you feel that your experiences in Vietnam, having served over there, that's what you did, you served, did that impact the way the rest of your life went, the way you looked at things, the way you
Well, I think it's an experience that has stayed with me and has been an important part of my life. Another story that I could tell you about would be the fact that my wife had 5 brothers and 1 sister, uh, uh, and her parents, of course. Their plan was to spend the rest of their life in Vietnam, and Mai and I would be here. And that was when I left. But in 1975, the government of South Vietnam fell to the communists, and her family, having been very close to the military, as I say, her older brother was a 2-star general. They were able to escape Vietnam at that time, like so many other Vietnamese who were lucky enough to escape. And so that summer of 1975, is that the year?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
19 people arrived at our house in Massachusetts from Vietnam.
By surprise, or did you get some type of forewarning?
Well, we helped them. We helped them with paperwork, but so we knew that they were coming.
19.
But they were totally separated from each other, and their escape routes were totally different from each other. They were on all of the Pacific Islands, and Wake Island and Guam, and the Philippines and so forth. And then they ended up in the 4 refugee camps that were set up in the United States, but eventually got to our house. And so we had the job of helping them figure out how to make a new life for themselves in the United States.
Yeah. Not an easy thing at all.
And to get the kids into school. I mean, there were children, and a couple of them spoke English, and some of the others didn't speak any English, and so they had to learn the language. They had to get into school. The people had to get jobs and so forth. So there was a lot to do for them.
So a lot of time has passed since then. They've done well for themselves.
Oh yes. And it's interesting that all 19 of those people, actually there were 4 tag-alongs. Like for example, one of the people who arrived at our house was my wife's oldest brother's pilot, and so there were those kind of people. Mm-hmm. And so I think those 4 people went their own way, and then the rest of them stayed with us. We got jobs for them, get the kids into school, and so forth.
Wow. And where were you at this time?
Foxborough, Massachusetts.
Really?
I was at the Red Cross in Boston at that time.
Wow. Did most of them pretty much stay in the New England area, or they kind of spread out across the states? Or?
Some of them stayed in New England. Some of them went to New Jersey. Some of them went to Washington and so forth, and now they're all over the place. But the interesting thing is that they're all still alive, with the exception of my wife's mother, mm-hmm. who was 83 when she came over.
Oh wow!
And she has since passed. My wife's father died a year after we left, so he did not come, but all the rest of them came. And they're still around.
Kind of bittersweet, it's terrible to have to leave your homeland.
Yeah.
But your wife got her family
to make
nearby.
a new life.
Yeah.
In a new country. But there were a lot of Vietnamese who were were welcomed to the United States, and they're all citizens now. I mean, I'm talking about the families, all citizens now.
Hmm. Wow. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So you're now retired.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have. Well, you do have contact with the Red Cross because you're now doing what?
Well, after I retired in 1995, I continued to volunteer for the Red Cross, um, locally at the chapter, and I would go out on disaster assignments for some of the big disasters that took place. So I went on at least 12 or 15 disasters, you know. So I was in Puerto Rico and the state of Washington, Kentucky, um, you know, New York State, wherever there was a big national disaster, you know, that needed a team. That I did that for many years.
Well, Philip, I think that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything else that you might have missed or that you'd like to tell us about your experiences with the Red Cross or the Coast Guard?
Well, I haven't had any further relationship with the Coast Guard, but I have certainly maintained my relationship with the Red Cross, and I'm also a member of the American Red Cross Overseas Association, and these are the people. For this Overseas Association was formed by the women who served in World War II with Red Cross. Um, Providing coffee and donuts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who started this organization. And then the women who served in Korea and in Vietnam have continued to be part of this overseas association. And we have 2 meetings a year. We just had a meeting this past weekend at national headquarters in Washington, our second meeting of this year. So there's no one who fully understands the experience that they had overseas better than themselves, and so they live all over the country and they want to see each other, and so that's why they have this organization so they can get together.
Nice. About how many? Do you know about how many people are in this organization, overseas program?
Oh, I would say about 1,000.
Wow.
1,000. You know.
So is it just Vietnam related, or
No,
is it?
no, it's
all...
anybody who served overseas, you know, but it's mostly the women who want to get together. But there's a number of men also who are a part of this organization. Um, they have a convention somewhere in the country, usually in May, and then they have this meeting in Washington in the fall. The convention this year was in San Antonio. Next year it will be in Charleston, South Carolina. The convention 3 years ago was in Springfield, and I was the one who put that one together for them.
Wow. Keep busy, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I ran lots of big meetings for the Red Cross in New York and New England. I ran about 9 volunteer leadership conferences, annual meetings of volunteer leaders in New York State when I was there. And then I did the same thing when I was transferred to Connecticut for New England people. So,
well, Philip, I want to thank you for your service both in the Coast Guard and with the Red Cross, and I want to thank you for taking the time to let us interview you today.
you're welcome. Happy to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.